I want to start the class today on a different note because today is a special day in the Jewish calendar. It's an underrated day in the Jewish calendar. Today is the 7th of Cheshvan. And the 7th of Cheshvan really is the day in which the Jews in Israel, in the land of Israel, begin to ask for rain. They ask for rain in that prayer in Amidah that is dedicated to rain, which is called Birkat HaShanim. In that prayer, there's a verse that says, V'ten talu matali bracha, which is a verse that he said only in the winter. But the people of Israel, of the land of Israel, start asking that blessing today. We wait until December 4th to add this in the Birkat HaShanim, in that blessing. But in Israel, they start today. Why? Because in Israel, they desperately need for rain. They are dependent on rain more than we are here in America. And therefore, they ask for rain as soon as they can, which is today. Now, if they are so desperate for rain, why didn't they start asking for V'ten talu matali bracha for rain 2 weeks ago or last week? Why did they have to wait until today, the 7th of Cheshvan? And the answer is very powerful. The answer really dates back to the times of the temple in Jerusalem. During the times of the temple in Jerusalem, millions of people would come to the temple during Sukkot. Now, after Sukkot, they would go back home. Now, it would take 2 weeks for the last Jew to get back home in northern Iraq from his visit to the Jerusalem temple during Sukkot. Now, it would take until 2 weeks from Sukkot is the 7th of Cheshvan, which means that we had to wait. People of Israel, of the land of Israel, had to wait for 2 weeks for that last Jew to get back home before they could ask for rain. Why? So that he would not get stuck in rain on his travels way back home, or that his donkey would not get stuck in mud or something like that. Which teaches us, I think, maybe even more than two, but at least two very powerful lessons. Lesson number one, that we believe in the power of prayer. If we did not believe in the power of prayer, then we can ask for rain also 2 weeks ago. Anyway, our prayer doesn't help. But we do believe that our prayer helps. And if we are going to ask for rain, we believe that that rain is going to happen immediately. And that therefore that traveler can be stuck in rain. So we're not going to ask for rain so soon. That's number one. Number two, in even more powerful lesson, and that is that it shows us how far we have to go in order to exercise the commandment of loving your fellow as yourself. To the point that if I'm a farmer in Jerusalem, say, and I'm dependent on the fruits of my tree to make a living, I have to be willing to forego my livelihood for the comfort of another Jew, for someone else traveling who might get stuck in rain. Yes, I mean, stuck in rain, it's not the worst thing in the world, but still, I am supposed to be willing to forego my own goodness for someone else's comfort. That's how far we have to go to love a fellow Jew. Now, again, today is the 7th of Cheshvan. Today is the day in which not only did they start asking for rain, but I think in Israel, but also in which we have to think of those two lessons. We have to really believe in the power of our prayer and therefore dedicate ourselves to prayer, and believe in the power of loving your fellow as yourself, and try and do everything in our power also to exercise that commandment. So that's what this day today signifies, the 7th of Cheshvan. Beyond the fact that on the 7th of Cheshvan is also the day when the flood, when it began to rain, when the flood began, the flood that we just read about yesterday. So anyway, there are other significances to this day, but let's get right back to the Tanya. So we're at the bottom of page 129, as Margaret just pointed out. Just to recap very quickly, the very last concept that we spoke about, and that is that the prohibitions, the 365 prohibitions that there are in the Torah, really are there to prevent us from being imprisoned. Those are the words that we used, by the evil forces of this world. Evil forces tempt us with 365 ways, do this and do that. And the Torah says, no, don't fall in their trap. Don't do it. 365, therefore, negative commandments. Now, we spoke a little bit about how God is the one who creates evil. And we also spoke about how evil, therefore, does not have independent say or independent power, but he creates evil. And the Tanya doesn't speak about it here, but mainly to give the person, every single one of us, the freedom of choice. Now, we spoke about the word for evil in Kabbalah. There are two words used. One is klipot, which means peels, and one is sitra achra, which means the other side. And we explained very briefly, and that is because peels really refers almost like a fruit that has a peel. And it refers to the idea that the evil tries to imprison the goodness, like a peel imprisons the fruit in each, the goodness of the fruit. And by not following evil, then we are really allowing the fruit to come out, to not be imprisoned by its peel, by the evil forces that are the peel of that fruit. We also spoke about how this idea shares something much deeper, and that is that really the evil comes from the outside. There's always good inside. Sometimes, and that's true for human beings, and it's true for everything in this world. Sometimes the good is not seen because evil has taken over it. But we have to believe that in everything that appears so bad, really there's a fruit, there's goodness. It's just now imprisoned by this evil. That's number one. Number two, the second name, Sitra Achra, means the other side. And we spoke about how we have to be careful with our language, with saying negative things. And therefore it calls it the other side, not the evil side. Because if it doesn't need to use the word evil, it doesn't use it. But the other side refers to really this other side of goodness, which really means the fake side, the other. The real side is good. And referring again to this idea that we really believe that no human being, so to speak, has ever been born bad. Internally, inherently, we are good. Sometimes we become something else, the other, or the other side. But really, that's not us. That's something else. That's the other side, Sitra Achra. What we are inherently, what we are deep inside in essence, is good. And that, again, is another idea that this name for evil shares, Sitra Achra. Let's continue, and then we can elaborate on this. I think we're at the word, indeed, man is Klippa's only source of nurture, right, Margot?
Yes.
Okay, good. So then why don't you continue?
Okay.
Bottom of page 129.
Okay, indeed, man is Klippa's only source of nurture, expansion, and growth. No other creature, spiritual or physical, relates in any way to good or evil. The leopard is no worse than the lamb. Both are created with a certain nature that is not definable as good or evil. The leopard that preys on the lamb has committed no transgression of the divine will, nor does the devoured lamb become a martyred saint because it was eaten. In this sense, even the supernal angels, whose holiness, that is their proximity to God, far surpasses that of man, have the capacity neither for good nor for evil. An angel cannot do good or bad. It is an agent, a messenger, without the capacity for independent choice. To attribute good or evil to an angel is like attributing free choice to a machine. So all creatures, both supernal and ephemeral, are basically objects, neutral matter to which the concepts of good and evil cannot be applied. Only man, who lives in a world of divine concealment and temptation to evil, has been granted the capacity to choose between transcending them or succumbing to them. Only he can act evilly. Only he can nourish evil and increase its power. The 365 prohibitions of the Torah delineate the ways in which evil gains a hold on man. When a person transgresses one of the divine prohibitions, he nourishes its corresponding aspect of evil.
Okay, good. So returning to this first point that Rabbi Stein's points out, and that's true, only man has this temptation for evil. And evil only exists among mankind, not among animals or plants or stones or any other creatures of God. Now, we should really rejoice in that. Why? Because it shows that God believes in us. Maybe he doesn't believe so much in angels. Therefore, he doesn't give them the evil to choose from. Because if he had given them evil to choose from, they would fall in evil's trap each time, because they don't have the power, the control, the ability to choose right from wrong. But he believes in our ability to choose right from wrong. And therefore, he gives us this temptation just to test us. Just like I wouldn't test my 3-year-old child with the same test I would test my 14-year-old child. Why? Because I don't believe yet in his maturity. So I'm going to let him grow now in this cocoon. But when they grow up and they acquire more and more abilities, then they're ready also for more and more tests. Same year, we should be rejoicing in the fact that God is giving us this temptation for evil, because it shows how much he believes in us. It shows how much he believes in us, even more than he believes in angels, or as Rabbi Sternsier calls them, machine. So it's a good thing. It's really a good thing that we have temptations for evil. And that's why the Tanya in another place, I think in chapter 26, speaks about that sometimes we become depressed because of the temptations that we have, and sometimes because we fall in the trap of evil. And the Tanya says quite the opposite, that should not be a source of depression, Rabbi Shneur Zalman V'Liadi says, but it should be a source of great joy, because again, it relates to this idea that God believes in us, and therefore he gave us a test. If he did not believe in us, he would not give us that test. So it should really point to the strength that we have within, not to the weakness that we have within. It's a revolutionary thought if you think about this. Really, if you think about how, many people say, oh, wow, I'm so weak because I'm tempted to do A, B, and C. No, Tanya says, you're so strong, and therefore you're tempted to do A, B, and C. Otherwise, God would not give you those temptations. But he believes in you. He believes in your strength, not because he believes in your weakness, but he believes in your strength. Really, it's a revolutionary idea. I think psychologically can change a person's mindset completely. Then he chooses, then he focuses really on everything that is good in him rather than everything that is bad in him. There's a great story about Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berdichev, again, who was the advocate of the Jewish people, because he always found good things to say, no matter what the case was. He always judged people favorably, and many stories, and I think we've shared quite a few up until now, but there's a story about Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berdichev, who was once approached by this man who said, this man was complaining that he has a terrible Yetzer Hara, terrible evil inclination, and that he has so many temptations, and yes, he withstands them from time to time, but sometimes he falls in its trap, and he's complaining, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berdichev, please give me a blessing that I can get rid of my evil inclination. And Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berdichev says, you really want me to give you a blessing? I'm actually jealous of you. Jealous? Why? He says, I wish I had that evil inclination. Why? He says, because God doesn't give me those tests. Maybe God doesn't believe in me as much as he believes in you. So I'm jealous of your relationship with God, how much he believes in you. Now, it's really amazing. We scold our children, or we even scold people, maybe verbally or maybe just up here, because we don't dare say it because it's not polite. But we scold people that have all these temptations and fall in them. Quite often, look at Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berdichev. He looked at them in great regard, saying, wow, these people must be very strong, because if God gives them that test, it means that God believes in their strength. Now, it's true not just towards others, it's true towards ourselves. The Talmud famously says that God does not put a person in a test that he cannot withstand. God doesn't give a challenge, nisayon she'eno yachol la'amod bo, in the words of the Talmud, a test or challenge that one cannot stand. God doesn't give to a person. Now, what does that mean? What that means is that if God gives us a challenge, it's because he already believes in our ability to overcome that challenge. So the Yetzer Hara, the evil, really, God giving us that evil inclination is a testament that he believes in us. And therefore, maybe he doesn't give it to animals, doesn't believe in them. Maybe he doesn't give it to stones and whatever it may be, other parts of his creation, because he doesn't believe in them. But he does believe in us strongly. So we should rejoice each time the Yetzer Hara comes the evil inclination comes to tempt us. There's a great story on Sukkot. I don't know if I shared it or not, but just to show this, but a man who, I'll try to condense it into just a few seconds, but a man who literally sold his tefillin in order to buy an etrog for Sukkot. He was a very poor man. And he said, look, for the 7 days of Sukkot, I don't need to wear tefillin. We don't wear tefillin. But there's a mitzvah I do need to do tomorrow already, and that is to shake the lulav and etrog. So let me sell my tefillin. I'll worry about my tefillin after Sukkot. With the money, I'll buy an etrog and a lulav set that I can shake already tomorrow. And he bought this beautiful etrog. He came home and he hid it in the kitchen. And the next morning he comes, it's a mitzvah of the day, so not at night, but the next morning he had to go and shake the lulav. He goes to the kitchen, takes out his etrog, and he sees in the case that the etrog is gone. Oh. And he starts to inquire in the house, what happened to my etrog? I spent my whole fortune in this. And he was so anticipating to perform this mitzvah. Finds out his wife used his etrog thinking that it was a lemon. Yeah. He used it for the salad. So when his wife admits, I'm so sorry, I used it, I thought it was a lemon. The man had a great dilemma. He said, I could be very upset and I could shout at my wife and give her a piece of my mind. But I have another mitzvah not to perform. And that's the mitzvah of controlling myself, controlling my temper, my anger. So let me perform this mitzvah. That's a mitzvah that that comes even before that etrog. I need to perform now. So he took his wife and he said, come, let's have a dance. And he danced and he said, don't worry. I'm dancing because I'm performing a mitzvah. I'll explain to you later. And they started dancing in the kitchen and singing and rejoicing in the joy of the Chag of Sukkot. Then afterwards he went to shul. He had to borrow some etrog, and the Baal Shem Tov, who told the story, founder of the Hasidic movement, comes to him and he says, wow, you have a special etrog. He says, what do you mean I have a special etrog? This is the worst etrog in the synagogue. Said, no, it smells like the smell of paradise. Yeah. He says, what do you mean? It smells like the smell of paradise. How could it be? He says, you must have done something very special. He told him the story. He says, and the Baal Shem Tov said, you see, that's why it smelled like the smell of paradise. But sometimes God gives us a test. Now that evil inclination, yes, wants us to get angry, like in this case. And when we're able to control it, then we're able to exercise that strength that we have deep within, that maybe we had to dig very deep to find it, but that we do have deep within, and unleash it. And when it's unleashed, then we can achieve the highest highs. And God gives it to us again for us to be able to climb, not for us, God forbid, to fall, because he believes in us, in our strength, in our ability to climb to the highest of heights. So that's really the idea. Yes, William.
Isaac Bashevis Singer was once asked if he believes we have freedom of choice. And he said, of course, we have no choice.
We have no choice to believe that we have freedom of choice. Yeah.
But
right.
I don't think it's something we should rejoice, because many people are tested, as you would describe, and do the wrong things without any limits to being tested, and the consequences. It's not something that I rejoice in.
You're right. So we shouldn't rejoice in other people's challenges. That's wrong. Mm-hmm. We should rejoice in our challenge.
Okay.
When a challenge comes to us, then we should rejoice in what we have. Yeah. But for other people, we should always request and good and goodness and joys and no tests whatsoever. In fact, that's how we know. The Talmud is very, very strict about this, and says that when a suffering falls upon a person, and we spoke about this line in the Talmud in the past, but then a person should examine his ways and say, maybe I did something wrong. Maybe it's something in my life that I need to fix. If someone searched his ways and did not find anything, then he should know that this is suffering of love. It's God saying, hey, I love you. I want a relationship with you. Hello, I'm here. Now, this is true for the suffering that befalls a person himself. If suffering befalls someone else, then we can't say to someone, oh, you should examine your ways. Maybe something's wrong in you. No, quite the opposite. If suffering befalls someone else, then I have to shake the heavens to ask for mercy. Then I have no right whatsoever to say, oh, maybe he should examine his way. No, the opposite. Then that's a fine line. But that's when I should ask for mercy. And that's when same here. If a test befalls someone else, we should say to God, stop giving him test. It's enough. Only goodness, ach tov v'chesed, only goodness, to quote King David, only goodness and kindness should pursue this person. Now, when it comes to me, that's a different story. I know myself. No one knows me as much as I know me. So I have to really look at myself deeply in the mirror. But when it falls someone else, I don't know that person. So all I can do is shake the heavens on behalf of that person. But good point. That's right, William. Yeah. Any other comments?
Yeah, I've got a comment.
Please, Amy. Yeah.
Hi, it's Amy. So that story you told about the etrog,
Yes.
and basically the choice to not express anger,
Right.
or not direct it at somebody.
Right.
It's reminding me of something that I was reminded of yesterday, and that's the word responsibility.
Right.
So responsibility is our ability to respond. So it's our ability to choose how we respond if we pause before we let our, let's call it our animal instincts take over. So I thought that was a beautiful, beautiful story.
No, that's right. Beautiful. That's right. Responsibility is responsibility. Maybe it's the difference in the English language between the word response and reaction. We can't react, we have to respond. But you should know, way before Freud, way before Viktor Frankl, Carl Jung, all of these, the Talmud speaks about this responsibility. And in fact, the Talmud says that if a person has an inclination to eat, they're addicted to food and they can't control themselves. They see food, they have to eat. Or maybe not to that degree, but let's say I'm hungry now, it's lunchtime. I haven't eaten since breakfast. Now, I want to eat. Before jumping into your food, what should you do? Wait a little bit. And each time I have an inclination, I should wait a little bit. Why? Because that waiting, how long should you wait? 5 minutes, maybe a little less, at least 30 breaths in the words of the Talmud. Now, why? Because that 30 breaths will change my mode from a mode of reaction to a mode of response. Then I'll be able to relate to the food maybe with more control. Then I'll be the one in control of the food rather than the food being in control of me. By the way, there are things even in halakha, suggested in halakha that we should do when we eat. Eating is a big thing because that's when that's when we can fall into this inclination of, I don't care, let me just gratify myself. But if you look at videos, for example, of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, when he ate, he was very careful about this custom. It's a custom that's brought in halakha and the Midrash too. But that's that instead, I'll demonstrate it for you. But say I have my plate of food right here on my desk. Instead of me going down to my plate, the food should come up to me. Why? Because I'm the one in control. The food is not in control of me. I have to be in control. So the food should come up to me rather than me going down to the food. Now, these are little things that we should do really in order to exercise that full self-control, in order to be in the mode of response rather than the mode of reaction. But I think the most important of all of these customs is that waiting. Sometimes I'm angry, so let me wait 30 breaths. Let me wait, and let's see how we'll respond after 30 breaths. And I promise you, our response very often is very different, because when I initially wanted to respond, I was reacting, and that takes full control of me. Then I have no control over myself. So I think that's a great tip by the Talmud, by Judaism in general, to exercise that self-control. that mode of response. Yeah.
Rabbi,
Yes, Ronnie, please.
so evil, what's the spectrum of evil? Can one man's evil be another man's good? Who defines what evil is?
So that's an excellent question. So the Tanya will elaborate and speak about two types of evil. There is a type of evil that we create, human beings create, and there's a type of evil that is already created for us, and that is therefore the same for all. Now, these two types of evil, just to put it, to define them in Kabbalistic terms, there's what's called klipat noga, which is an evil that we create, human beings create, and there's shalosh klipot atmeot, the three impure peels that are considered to be evil that God created that we can't do anything about. Now, what is an evil, for example, that we can't do anything about? Murder, or any of those prohibitions, right? Stealing. Stealing is stealing. Murder is murder. Lying is lying. That's you can't change murder and say, well, it's for the good. You can't change stealing and say it's for the good. Murder is murder. Now, sometimes, yes, you can say, well, I killed in self-defense. That's not murder. It's self-defense. That's a whole different category. But murder is murder. That's evil that doesn't change. Now, what is that shalosh klipot atmeot? That comes from that evil force that God created, and therefore we have to stay away from. There's nothing we can do. There's evil that we create, and that comes from what's called klipot noga, which means the appeal of light, and that's really the neutral world. A lot of the neutral world is really not neutral as we believe in Judaism. There's nothing that is neutral in this world. It depends how we use the neutral. So it could be neutral in concept, but in action, there's no neutral world. What I mean by this, let's say sports. Sports is neutral, right? There's nothing good about sports necessarily, nothing holy about sport, nothing bad about sport. But it depends how I use sports. If I use sports in a bad way, so for example, I go and exercise and it gives me strength, or I go and build my muscles and it gives me strength, and then I use my muscles to punch someone and knock him out or hurt someone, then I've used sports in a bad way. That's bad, that's evil that we create through using what is conceptually neutral towards the bad. But we can also do that. We can also use sports for the good, right? If I exercise, makes me healthy, and my healthy self, therefore, then is better able to do good, then I've used sports for the good. Same with food, for example, that is neutral. Same with so many other things that are neutral conceptually in this world. So there is evil that we can create, depending on how we use those conceptually neutral things in this world. Of course, the goal is to use klipat noga for the good, not for the bad, to create good with it. But that's to answer your question. And Tanya goes deeper into this. Yeah. Good point. Any other questions?
What were the three evils? Murder?
Stealing.
They are called the three. They are called the three impure shalosh klipot atmeot, three impure peels, because they come from three sources. They're not speaking about three actions. Come from three Kabbalistic divine sources. Which are those sources, etc. That's a whole different discussion. But they are translated into really 365 evil things. 365 prohibitions are really point to 365 evil doings that God created that we can't do much about. Even though I will say this, that it says in the Zohar that in the times of Mashiach, those evil things will finally become permitted. Not that murder will become permitted, but somehow God will flip murder on its head and channel it into a whole different creation. It says, for example, that You know, the word for pig in Hebrew. One is not allowed to eat pig. Also, one of the 365 commandments. Now, the word for pig in Hebrew is chazir, which also alludes to what the fact that chazir in Hebrew does not just mean pig. Chazir comes from the word chazar. And the Zohar says, Atid HaKadosh Baruch Hu lachziro lanu, that God will give him back to us. Chazir means to return. And that's because it will be returned to us and we'll be able to eat it when Mashiach comes. So you see things that are completely prohibited during these times, yet the Mashiach will come, things will become permitted. So it could very well be, at least according to the Zohar, foremost book of Kabbalah, that those things that are completely prohibited will become permitted at some point during the Messianic times. But until then, they are completely prohibited. There's not much we can do about them.
We can eat pig when the Mashiach comes?
So according to the Zohar, yes, that it will be
Wow.
returned to us. That's why it's called chazir. Now, I don't know if that will be my first dish. Yeah, will come.
Amazing.
So getting back to evil
Yes.
and the same event. Let me say it a different way. So there is evil that I can recognize inside of me, and it feels like that's evil.
Right.
Then there are things that I'm told are evil, but I don't feel are terrible, but I don't do them because the outside world says they're evil. What's the difference in knowing evil and being told that that's evil?
Well, I would say that the only source of our knowledge of evil is God. So God gave us the Torah, and He says, "This is evil. Don't do it." It's whether I feel that it's evil or not is irrelevant. God says it's evil. It's evil. Do I feel that? I don't know. Do I feel that mixing two types of seeds is evil? The seed of peaches and the seeds of apple, if I mix them, I feel that's evil. I personally don't. But God says it's evil. You're not allowed to do it. So don't do it. Respect the order of my nature, my creation. So don't do it. So again, I don't think it depends on our feelings. That thing depends on what the outside world also tells us. I think it only depends on what God tells us. God, the creator of evil, knows what is evil, and therefore told us, don't do this and don't do that.